what would happen if there were just a few seed companies and there aren't as many sources for seeds?
Well, if there
I
was,
feel like I'm monopoly.
Omar?
well, first of all, they would be monopolizing the game pretty much, and
Uh-huh.
they make it so that they could raise prices whenever they wanted, and there wouldn't be any competition at all, so they could raise the prices. And also, if there was ever anything that made that seed go bad and it wouldn't be able to be grown anymore, what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
What about genetic diversity in the population? How would that have an effect on this situation if we have just a few seed companies that are making these seeds that have to work with the pesticides?
If there's a disease, it could wipe out like everything. We would have to start over.
but they do have banks for older seeds and stuff like that, so.
Yeah.
It would take time to regrow them, but kind
Right.
of like reproduce them, but
Uh-huh.
there's still something to fall back on.
Okay, Natalie?
They're also only modifying certain foods, and yes, there is crossing over of certain traits, but they're not necessarily changing. Like, I mean, the flowers, any sort of flowers aren't necessarily going to be changed, and the biodiversity in flowers that people like to put in their homes aren't necessarily going to be changed unless we specifically change them. So it would limit biodiversity in the specific plant that they're changing.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Okay. Morgan?
When does, like, testing on the food that we eat become as thorough and important as the drugs that we take? Food we intake every single day, drugs we take when we're sick. So, you know, drugs have to be tested on for like years and years and years, but this food hasn't been monitored that long, and it's already on the market, and we're intaking it, we don't know the side effects.
Okay, and I've got a statement that we'll pick up on that in just a minute.
I think a large part of whether or not it's only companies being benefited or not is whether society accepts it, because these, as you said, these are new foods, and they're not really proven, so I think if society started to accept it, it would also be more widely grown, because I think the movie said, like, Canadian canola oil went down 25% of overall sales. I think that's a lot, but that's because European nations don't accept it. They don't. So I think it's just whether or not it's proven.
Does anybody else want to say anything else about the companies and how the companies are affected? Daphne?
Well, I would say that it is, I mean, I agree with what Natalie said way earlier about how it could be less beneficial just to the companies and more to other people as well. But currently, well, in one of the articles it talked about how companies would start suing independent researchers and they tried testing the foods with pesticides and like focus of it. So I think that currently it's absolutely only beneficial to the company to get organic foods.
Okay, why don't we try another one? Next one says, the American public doesn't need to worry about GM foods because they're regulated by government agencies.
You see that again?
The American public doesn't need to worry about GM foods because they are regulated by government agencies. And we gotta get you this way if we're gonna get you in the camera, guys. Keep over that way, okay. So are we all in disagree? Is anybody agreeing? Nobody's agreeing. Everybody's disagreeing. Who's definitely disagreeing?
Right.
Okay, so definitely disagrees are here, disagrees are over here. Okay. So why don't we, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
So I disagree with that statement because it says that we have to worry because they're not regulated by the government. I don't necessarily think we have to worry about them as much as some people do, because some people are just absolutely freaking out and think it's like the end of the world and we're all gonna start mutating, which I don't think is gonna happen. But I think that the government does need to regulate, because like Morgan said, we eat it every single day and food has a big, big impact on health and stuff like that. So I disagree with that statement.
Okay, Brittany?
I found it interesting that in one of the articles I read, it said that a GM food product doesn't need to be labeled on the food label, and that someone may be buying this product and not know exactly what they're being put in their body. And I think that GM foods, because of the unknown possible harms they present to the human body, should be labeled on the food product, and that is a lack in regulation by the government.
Daphne?
One of the articles quotes the FDA saying that they don't have the time, money, or resources to monitor genetically modified foods. And also they claim that the reason they don't is because they're a whole product or.
Yeah, that was very interesting, the part about how whole corn wasn't regulated by the FDA because it's a whole food, but cornflakes are. It's like, okay. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Andrea?
Another concern like about the corn is that there's like a Starlight corn in the third article about how it contaminated 25% of our corn harvest, and that's the government regulations fault. And it's not even just the foods we eat, it's like more than that.
How about some people over here that are slightly less disagreeing maybe? Anybody? Sure, American public doesn't need to worry about GM foods because they are regulated by government agencies.
Didn't the movie also?
I think there's always something heard about if it's the government, there's always corruption in the government, of course, and they said that, I remember in the video there's something about the patents on the seeds, and they said that they didn't want the patents, and they came out anyways, and there's an ongoing trial for this, right? So, I mean, initially they said they weren't gonna have patents, but there's nothing the government could do to stop them, and they did.
Yesterday, somebody asked me the question after the movie about the guy that was sued by the canola farmer that was sued, and they wanted to know, what happened to the suit. And I went online last night and found out as recently as 2011 that the suits are continuing to go on. And now the canola farmers have countersued back so that they're protecting their position. So it's still they're still suing back and forth basically, and it hasn't been decided. So, they're sort of suing Monsanto and other companies like that from the standpoint of protecting themselves so they won't be sued individually for having the seeds spread or whatever. I don't know if it was the same guy, because I couldn't remember his name, but yeah. You were gonna say something, Ashley, what was it? You sure? Okay. Okay, how about this next one? The amount of pesticide used by farmers can be reduced by using genetically modified plants. The amount of pesticide used can be reduced by using GM plants.
A couple of G's here and there.
Yeah.
So we're some where's our split between agree and disagree? You agree? You agree? You disagree? So straight place. All right. So are you guys the disagree? And these are the agree.
I definitely.
You definitely agree. Okay. So let's start with you, Kevin. Why do you definitely agree?
Well, it's just like obvious. 'Cause, I mean, like BT corn, that it almost doesn't require pesticides just because it's all integrated into corn. So why would you even need to use pesticides? I don't even understand what the disagree is thinking about.
Okay. Andrea?
On the disagree perspective, in the short run, it definitely does. Like you said, it produces its own pesticides. But then the article talked about the super weeds that are growing, and it requires even more toxic pesticides just to get rid of them, as the GM and the non-GM weeds breed and make weeds that are resistant to pesticides.
Ashley?
Also, to keep going on what Andrea said, what happens when the insects become immune to the stuff they put out? Then they're gonna have to start putting out more and more stuff to kill the insects that are already immune to what's kind of going on.
So kind of to tie in with general biology topics, if something becomes resistant to something and it changes in such a way that the population and the traits are changing, what do we call that? Adaptation or evolution, really, right? Natural selection, because the ones that survive are going to pass on those traits. Kevin, you want to say something?
Well, penicillin, for example, was developed a long time ago. And it's like just now that the bacteria are starting to develop slight resistance to it, right? And bugs breed much slower than bacteria.
That's true.
They breed in weeks rather than hours. So it's going to take bugs a lot longer to develop an immunity to BT or whatever than it will bacteria, and it's taking at least 50 years for bacteria. So it's going to take probably hundreds of years. And by that time we'll have developed more things that
So you're confident that science could solve this problem?
Science could I think it could outrun the bugs.
Okay. Anybody over here want to say anything? Or anybody else that we've not heard from before? Sure. The amount of pesticide used by farmers can be reduced by using genetically modified.
They already use pesticides, but.
Yeah, so many companies made the seeds specifically to go with pesticides. Like, I think it was the Roundup. So they engineered the seed to withstand the pesticide and sprayed the pesticide on top of the engineered seed.
Roundup is a herbicide.
It kills the weeds, not the crop plant. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to our next one. GM plants or GM seeds hurt organic farmers? GM plants or GM seeds hurt organic farmers? Okay, so are you in the disagree? You're disagree? How about you, Katie? Disagree? You're agree? You're moving over there? Okay, and who's definitely agree over here? All right. And Katie, are you at the edge of definitely agree or you agree?
I'm just agreeing.
You agree, okay. So, how about, let's do agree first. Somebody want to agree in general? You're not adamant?
I agree and disagree simultaneously.
Okay. So that's why you're there, gotcha. All right, so why?
Well, I agree that, it hurts them because like their crops can be contaminated and because it makes it a lot harder for them to make sure that their crops are like pure. But I disagree because, sometimes more people would want their products. And so their products are in higher demand, but it's also more expensive and harder for them to keep their products.
Morgan?
I agree with what Michelle said. It's kind of like in the middle, but I think that I would more agree than disagree because, like they do get paid more for their products than GM products, but you can't control the air and you can't control bees, you know, so like that one organic farmer, you know, he got planted GM products on 3 sides of his corn and then, you know, his corn was like gone. So then that does hurt him a lot because he paid more for the organic seeds and then reaped less because it was contaminated.
Ashley?
Also, they have to put more effort into making sure that theirs stays pure, because the machines that come along, they could also put in the GM products into their own stuff, along with like the different stuff they use to collect the corn and stuff.
So the cleaning and all the processing has to be much more careful. Daphne?
In addition to that, there's also the risk of, the producers of the GM products, so the farmers trying to get products.
That seems particularly awful, doesn't it? It's kind of like double whammy. Yeah.
With the seeds, and then you can't harvest as much, and then you have to pay
Yeah, it doesn't seem fair somehow. You were over here. Tell us why you're over here, Kevin.
I think GM foods should be able to be grown by farmers because it's not pesticide or herbicide or fertilizer.
So you think it should be part of being organic?
Yeah.
Okay.
That if you have a vegetable that kills the beetles that try to attack it, then that would definitely benefit organic farmers if you call that organic.
Right.
What's the definition of organic? What is that?
That's a good question. I mean, I think organic is not modified in any way and is supposed to be quote pure. They haven't used any pesticides or things that change it.
So I predict that there will be no organic foods in like a couple generations from now, because they will all no one will be able to get pure ones unless they like.
Either that or our definition of pure may change, right? Yeah. What do we mean by pure, right?
I mean, like, I could grow weeds and say I'm an organic weed farmer. But then the DNA of the daffodils is completely different than the DNA for your organic cabbage, but it's still organic.
Right.
And that's really at the heart of the GM stuff.
That's
that
true.
The DNA's changed. So it's really organic, it's just not quite the same food.
Okay, we're doing great here. We've got a few more here. We're getting close. How about, GM foods do not cause environmental damage? GM foods do not cause environmental damage. This is kind of a tricky one, because it's got lots of sides to it. So, are we all disagreeing, or will we have some agreed people on this end? You're in between. How about you, Natalie? You're agreeing? How about you? Dale? You're disagreeing? Are you agreeing? Okay, so we have 3 agrees. Everybody here is disagree. Are you guys definitely disagreeing?
I'm definitely.
You guys are definitely disagreeing. Can you see that? Okay. So let's start with you, Ken, James. Why do you definitely agree, or agree anyway, that it does not cause damage?
I don't think that you can actually define what a genetic population change as damage. For instance, mutations naturally have been occurring for many millennia and generations ever since life first started on the planet Earth. So if you're talking about changing a population for mutations, which is basically what genetic modifying is, and this is a natural process that has been going on, this is not damaging the environment in any way. It may be accelerating, but it is not damaging.
Okay.
I disagree with that.
Okay.
There's something in the video about, I think it was the
Speak up a
corn.
little bit.
There was something in the video about the corn, the
Uh-huh.
BT corn.
BT corn, has
That
it?
had the, they said it was getting in the soil after the corn was decaying, and it was making it so that the, I don't know, it's contaminating the soil, so I guess that.
And the fungi that are in the soil.
And that could, yeah.
Affect things that live in the soil. Yeah. Andrea?
I also talked about the super weeds. They said that farmers have to till more and have to put more toxic chemicals for weeds to run off, which is damaging to the environment.
Okay. Anybody in the general disagree pool over here want to add? Kevin?
I have something to review, James.
Okay.
Would corn or whatever ever have naturally a jellyfish gene in it?
How would you know?
What?
How would you know?
I could almost, it's almost 100% probability that would not happen. It'd have to be the most extreme of all mutations.
It's not really a jellyfish gene, it's just a characteristic.
Well, you can put the genes in it.
The jellyfish accounts.
Michelle, you want to say something about definitely disagree?
I would say that it definitely does for the reasons that they've already said, and also because of what we were talking about before, where it like destroys the diversity, and so it would make it like harder for like things to not just like wipe everything out.
Ashley?
Also, when it kills like they give the stuff for the crops and it kills the animals that eat it. What about the animals that eat the animals that ate the crops? Then those also get poisoned and start dying off, and it like goes up the food chain and wipes things out.
That's all just ecology, right? You've got your food web and your food chain and everybody being affected.
It's kind of like, well, I don't necessarily disagree with what James said, but I just think that like, it's not natural the way that we're going about accelerating the world or whatever. Because there's no doubt that things are gonna die, new things are gonna come up, but I don't think that it's necessarily healthy for us to be changing things that weren't meant to be changed.
Okay, I've got a statement about that when we get to that in a minute. Morgan?
When you think about like super races almost, like the human race, do you not think that we've damaged the environment by killing hundreds of species, by all of the different things that we've done? I mean, is it not the same with like super plants? They're gonna wipe out everything else, just like with what Michelle said, limiting biodiversity, and that is gonna cause an issue when everything's the same. There will come a point when there isn't very much variation between one brand and the next, and you know, there isn't gonna be golden corn or whatever that weird corn is that has like a bunch of different colors in it, you know, and it's just gonna be like all one. They're all gonna have the same nutrients, you know, and is that what we want?
Right.